Oh my. So I guess the challenge here is that I am going live everywhere as usual. All right, let me join. There we go. Okay, everybody. So change of plans. At the last minute, I was going to say that perhaps I would talk, and maybe I still will. I'll talk a little bit about where you could go from here. But what I also really want to do, oops, there we go. What I also really want to do is go over the final project. Of course, a couple of people have asked about that, so that's going to make some sense to do that. So let's talk about it. So the idea is, of course, that this is a platformer, aka side scroller type of game. It is due the last day of class. So that would be next Thursday. Officially, if you have not used any of your late days, I'm going to start grading them on Friday. I basically have to get through things by Monday, I believe. That's kind of the weird way things, and I want to get them worked out, as soon as possible. There's going to be a little bit of time on Wednesday where I may not be as accessible as I normally would be, because I'm going to be helping someone move to Boston. So I have to do a bit of driving back and forth and whatnot there. But yeah, officially it is due at the end, the last day of class, plus or minus. So if you're not going to have it to me by the last day of class, let me know and we'll figure out what to do about that. So again, so what are we going to do in this project? Okay, there shouldn't be a lot of surprises on here. Since we covered tile maps a lot earlier than we normally did, so a lot of you used tile maps in your last game. So the tile maps and tile map colliders are a big chunk of potentially of any kind of platforming game. Excuse me 1 second. Someone is just sending me all sorts of notifications on my phone, which is odd. We don't get that many. So this the tile map is going to be the main piece of our sort of environment. You can certainly have tile maps that provide most of your platforms for the kind of static platforms. That makes designing the environment relatively straightforward. If you have dynamic platforms, you have a couple of different options. You can have, tile maps can move, as some of you may have noticed. So you can even do things like have tile maps that move up and down in response to certain things. So tile maps aren't necessarily static, but you can use them statically to create a lot of, give your environment a lot of amount of camera movement. And we want the camera to be more than just a straight parenting to the player. You should be doing automatically follow the player into, off the edge of the map, perhaps. I demonstrated that in one of my other videos. So there should be some sort of movement following of the player, or there can even be some like triggered movement if you have sort of activity or action that makes it possible for the player to get through some other area. It's nice to kind of draw their attention to the other area, and then go back to the camera. Maybe we'll go through some of that today. We'll just kind of do a freeform build on our platformer here. So the camera needs to move and follow in some interesting way. The player is going to navigate obstacles and climb or jump. It doesn't have to necessarily climb and jump, but climb. Our last project, when we had straight top down, we didn't really have to interact with gravity, so we could kind of just say, okay, left and right, up and down, or left, right, back, forward, whatever. We didn't deal with gravity at all. So here we want to be, navigating through an environment that has more physics to it, right? We have to overcome that. We have to deal with, when is the player on the ground, for example? So can the player jump? Elaborate the puzzle needs to be, doesn't need to be. It could be just as simple as discovering the proper way to, get the key, move the obstacle, unlock the door, something. So there's, you have to pick up an object, you have to navigate an object, you have to move an object, you have to trigger something, and then that will cause something else to happen that will modify the environment. That's the idea. So there's a puzzle. The puzzle means the player must do something to change something about the environment to be able to get past it, right? Unlock a door. That would be a kind of a simple puzzle. I guess find the key, unlock the door. A pit. Pits are okay, but I'd like to see something more than just the player falls off a surface and falls into a pit. Usually there should be something like, the player walks across something and it moves and it activates, and the player must escape before falling into the pit, right? Something more interesting like that. So a triggered action that triggers the trap, right? So something dynamic that way. And also similar to the last game, there should be some sort of smart player, and we can use the techniques we did in the last game. It sees the player, it should modify its behavior somehow. Maybe it fires a projectile, or it gets angry and alerts somebody, it sees something. So you kind of even sort of, imagine it sees the player and it starts screaming as long as it sees the player. And as long as it's screaming, then maybe there are going to be things that spawn as a result of that, right? That sort of thing. I didn't put in a lot of things in here with regards to the specific techniques, but as I've mentioned, we want to have things like we want to see, okay, how would you use an event? How would you use interpolation? How would you use coroutines? You want to be using all those sorts of things. We're going to be able to sort of check through those to make sure that we've done them. All right, the basic movement is going to be moving platform to platform from the ground. For the project. Now, are there any questions? You can either turn off or turn on your microphone, or go ahead and type in there. Player's bumping into something there. I'm not quite sure what barrier. All right, the player can jump. Notice the player can jump when it's on the ground, but it doesn't double jump in the air. Notice that the camera is following the player. Whoops. And if the player falls down and hits those coins, the player... Oh, I know what's going on. There is an effector there. There's an invisible effector here. You'll see if it gets there, it gets pushed. I should have some sort of something indicating that effector is there. So let's see. We're gonna go this way and we'll run and we'll try to get, that's a tough one to get over there. Let's see if I can jump on top of this coin and then jump over here. Oops, I can't. I have to be, there we go. So if I needed to get that coin or hit that coin for some reason, let's see, we'll jump over here. The trap in here that I have, I guess it's not so much of a trap. In the case it needs to kind of work on some of the gameplay elements here. Whoops, there we go. It's not exactly the most even game, I guess. Let's see, we had, all right, I'm gonna stop and I'm gonna jump over it to, I'm gonna move my player in the scene here. So let's go to the scene, and you can see there's a lot to do it there. So I'll grab the player hero and we will move here. And to get to this chest, that is the end of the layer. It's going from A to B, or 1 to B, something like that. All right, so let's restart the game. And you'll see now I have this sort of area that is a simple sort of puzzle where, well, in this case, it's not a very effective puzzle because I can jump high enough, and these things aren't killing me here. I can jump high enough to get past here, but the idea is that there would be a fountain here I have to turn on that would give me the ability to get past here. If I can get into that fountain now, I will I can get into that fountain, notice it will float me up. That's using a buoyancy effector that gets turned on by that switch there. Right. So let's see, to make that a more effective puzzle, we do something fairly simple, like say, wow, okay, if there was we'll go in and edit the map here. We'll go to the grid, the platforms. We'll grab some blocks here, and we'll do this. Okay. And now there's a very limited area in here. I don't think the player is going to be able to necessarily jump. It's going to be certainly hard for the player to jump there. So now it's definitely a more effective puzzle in that you have to hit that. And now once you have that, that should give you the extra lift you need. This other thing. It's a good idea to have this thing destructible. I think that would be a key thing to do. There we go. Come on, come on. I think I might be able to jump once I. Here we go. Yep, it's a tough one. Could be possible now. Anyway, there we go. All right. So had that not been there, maybe I would have been able to jump. And oh, that was a destroyable. So I should have made the other one destroyable. As you can see, I couldn't have gotten through here had I not. Whoops, I touched the wall. So I start over again. So maybe if that was turned off, let's turn that off. Let's see, is it possible? I guess it is possible to still get through there. All right, so there would have been our trap here, or our puzzle. Our trap is sort of this swinging ball. Now that's there's not really an activator for the swinging ball, but you can imagine I go to my tile map and I will go to platforms and I will put something, say, right here. Trickier now. Should have been able to swing down. Work something out where it won't swing down until unless the player triggers a trap by touching a certain area, entering a triggering area, that sort of thing, right? So let's imagine here that let's see, this circle collider. Each of these have a circle collider. I could go through and enable all the colliders, or there could even be some sort of death turned on or off, depending on whether or not I have gone through a particular or triggered something that would do it. Okay. Where the player normally is sort of going to touch an object or collect an object in order to get past. It could even be at, for example, imagine I'm going to create another grid here. And we'll say 2D object, another tile map. Okay. And this tile map, I could have it do something rather interesting, which will be this one over here, these 4. And I'm going to add a component. I'm going to add a tile map collider right there. So it's not really going to do anything, just going to sit there. And let's see, let's get rid of maximize on play. So it's just going to sit there. But I script here called platform mover. Okay. And this should be right. So what we'll do here would fixed update, not fish update. And we'll get rid of update. Very similar to how, for example, the tree moved back and forth in .y, excuse me, .y. It's less than 30. Transform translate. And we're going to move by a certain amount. We're going to say new vector 3 time delta time. It'd be some fixed amount. Well, let's see. We know that fixed update in our case is going to be what, 0.2. So I'm just going to set that. Oh, sorry, 0.05, 0.05, and 0. All right. So now that that is done, I come back and I start the game. Hero, where's our hero? And we'll put him right there for starters. Right. So the camera will be on player. See, okay, let's try to get there. Whoops, I missed it. All right, let's try it again. Now, this is a problem for the player. We could do something really, really simple and just say transform position equals new vector 3, 0, 0, 0. Right? So that's going to say, okay, at the end of, it's going to move a whole lot. Now, what I could do, you see, to get to a certain point, it will start over again. Now, this might be a good case where, all right, let's go and we'll look at the tile map. So we'll go to this tile map and we'll call this the elevator. And let's be a little bit, and we will come down here off screen. Maybe that, and maybe there's one that's like here, and maybe there's one that's like here, and I'm going to figure out, I'm going to get to 30. So it is going to reset itself. But before it gets there, we're going to have the opportunity to potentially hop on another one. Lost the ability to move. Oh, I know why. He's not grounded when he's on there. So that's sort of a problem. Oh, he's got problems here. All right, so now you can see last opportunity. So let's get on that one. We're going to go up. Oh, that's a problem. Okay, we can't use the platform to go all the way to the top. Have to get here. Oops. Somehow get past there and go up here, and then we can get onto that last platform. But even then, that's not really going to help us too much because that's not going to move us to the top. Okay, so there's the idea of having sort of some kind of, we can call that a puzzle, call it a, you could say, okay, that's not going to move until you press some button. Or maybe the puzzle trap part is, well, what happens if he collides with this other part here? I mean, let's do this. See this thing that's in space here? I could then say, well, let's do something terrible to our poor player, and we'll say that there is another type of 2D object. We're going to say, here's a tile map. And this one is going to be awful for the poor player. It's going to be called spikes. Okay. Spikes. All right. Add component is we're going to have a tile map collider 2D. And let's put here this particular game should be an asset somewhere. Assets, scenes, scripts, palettes. There we go. Save. And I will paint that in here and maybe here and here. I should probably make them bigger. So I guess I could use the 64. And we're going to put that in Buy It Games palettes as well. I'll use that one instead. There we go. That's far more dangerous looking. All right. And we will now say that this one, we're going to add a layer called spikes as well. And then within the player, we could do something like say, well, if spikes, then die, right? If we collide with a layer called spikes, we die. Right. Here's the spikes. In this case, we didn't really. So you could even do things like say, well, all right, here becomes a puzzle or something more interesting where we could go in and we could go to the grid and let's look at platforms and we'll erase maybe this one and we'll go to spikes and erase this one. And maybe those two. Okay, maybe see where I'm going now. All right. So now the challenge would be we've got this raising platform, and if our player can get on it. Oh, wait, it's still grounded. What's going on here? The keys aren't working. What did I do wrong here? He thinks he's not grounded. Let's go back, check out our hero. We'll look at our hero's script to make sure that he is in fact grounded. So what mechanism did we use to figure out grounded here? We are allowed to do movement, hero movement. That should be okay then. Oh, wait, no. There's something that's not working about that ground here. Hold on. Spikes is default. Elevator is default. Whoops. That elevator should have been ground. All right, let's try this now. All right. That's kind of interesting. All right. So that's the idea behind drafts. We won't get into too much of that. All right. So we want to see something like that. All right, some simple traps, some simple effectors, though, of course. Like the swinging ball of death is a good use of effectors. You do want to see effectors be used in your game somewhere. In this, I actually used 2 effectors. That game object is there. The surface effector. Interesting. All right. So these things I haven't touched in a while. All right, so that's there as well. You will need to tune your game so it's going to appropriately work. So we've got effectors, we've got a bit of a puzzle, we've got a bit of a trap, we have some joints. Again, going back and looking at our requirements. We have the basic camera motion in this particular game. Right now, the main camera is being moved according to, I believe is, yep, here's the camera controller script. And this camera controller script is doing something very, very simple, which is just following. So we want to do something a little bit more than this. One of the examples I like to give is say, okay, only move the camera position, only change the camera. We will let this somehow know about the player. We'll call it game object target. And we will say if target dot position. We'll do this. We'll say if vector 3 or vector 2. I'm really interested in X and Y here. Target transform position versus the camera position. If that is greater than 2, then we go ahead and move the camera. Okay, so this is a really, really simple first approximation of camera motion. That's a little bit more interesting, right? So now, oops. All right, we have to first go to the hero and tell the camera controller script. Let's make this public. All right, let's be able to set it, look for its target. We'll go back over here. Now we know where its target is. So the target will be the hero. And wait a minute. Sorry, I get this wrong. This cam pose is already the player's position. Okay, so this is what should be happening here. So this is the desired camera position, and this is the actual camera position. This would be a good case for using interpolation or something here. So, all right. And notice it's pretty jumpy though. Right. What should happen is that when the player moves more than a certain distance, this should trigger the camera motion, but then the camera motion itself should be done by something smoother. Like, for example, use a coroutine. to like smoothly move, or use interpolation. Don't just snap to that value, move maybe 10% closer. Use the lerp. Use the lerp interpolation right in here, or even better yet, do it as part of some kind of coroutine. All right. But that's the basic idea. Have something that sort of, what do we have left? So we have camera motion, and we're going to use either interpolation or you use coroutines for that. We're going to have some effectors. We have some enemies in here. We have the saw, we have the mace, and we have this mace 128. And you'll see in this case, what I've done is that there are some different behaviors. There's a basic enemy, and a basic enemy just moves back and forth. All right, you see this move position. So the basic enemy moves back and forth, but then there are more elaborate enemies. That is like, for example, the mace enemy. It also, let's see, the saw enemy. Let's look at the saw enemy. It rotates in addition to the other. Basic enemy started this coroutine that has its moving back and forth. And then the other enemy, the saw enemy, has an update routine in it. So the coroutine of the first one gets activated to make it move back and forth. And the update in the one that inherited from the basic enemy, that's the one that's making it actually rotate. Right? So these motions are actually both inherited, or they're both from the same base, this back and forth. Right? This one decides to rotate. This one is only moving back and forth. And the other one is moving back and forth and fading in and out. Let's see how that one. So this guy here is, let's see if that is the same one. That's mace. And that is using mace enemy, which starts that. It inherits from saw enemy. Now it's got mace enemy. Change the color. Right? And it also has the ability to be destroyed. So if something hits this mace enemy, it gets destroyed as opposed to the other one. So none of these enemies in here are particularly smart. Now, if we wanted to add smarts to them, we would do something similar to what we did in the previous game, which is why I had it up here. If you'll remember using, not the canvas, our, click on a squirrel here. All right, here's one of our townies. And script here, the follower, I think is also based on one of the other enemies. Nope, this is a unique one, where it would look using this raycast recap, I think, on the sort of things I'm looking for in the project, right? So if you expanded on this existing project, an A here, like I said, this project, somewhere in the B minus range, because it doesn't quite have the player, it's not using the ray casting to figure out where things are. It's not really super coherent. But it does demonstrate effectors and forces and joints and triggers and whatnot. So it gets part of the way there. Any questions? It seems like we're down to one here. Oh no, we have a couple of people. Wow, my apologies. We've got a few more people than I realized. Anyone have any questions on any of those things? If not. Oh, somebody's typing. Take another sip of tea. So it would be triggered, and then the player would have to navigate a way around that. So yes, that would count. So a simple falling platform. Platforms that give you a certain amount of time are kind of cool before they fall away. It's kind of neat. Cross before it falls. But the nice thing well, two things, or not two things, something you need to do is indicate to the player that yes, the platform is about to fall. So a lot of the time what you'll do is, have a coroutine that might shake the platform up and down as a result of the trigger, indicating to the player that yes, something is about to happen. Or you could have, the whole world turn red and a countdown timer, I suppose, depending on the kind of genre you're going for. But, having something like that would certainly be fine. For example, if I had a grid here, I'm going to add another. You're really not limited to the number of tile maps you can have. So I'm going to have yet another one. And this one I'm going to call drop zone or something like that. And I'm going to add a component, which is the usual tile map collider, but also I'm going to add a rigid body 2D to this one. Okay. In this rigid body 2D, I'm going to be careful. I'm going to freeze the rotation. I'm going to freeze the X position. And I'll put this here. And in the game, what's going to happen is that it will just start to drop. Okay. And the weird thing is if anything collides with these coins on the outside, the whole game restarts. And I could certainly make it so that it would hit something else or have some limit, right? You can really use physics a lot to your advantage here, right? So since this has a collider on it and a rigid body on it, I could certainly have, let's see, under platforms here. If I have this, all right, that prevents it from destroying the world. Now, what I could also do is put that there. And we'll close it. An empty, and we'll call this the floater. Add component. A buoyancy effector 2D. And let's see, add a component, which is going to be a box collider 2D. Which is, and we say used by effector and is a trigger. So now you'll see that the platform doesn't go anywhere, is up there, unless, of course, I disable, I disable the buoyancy collider. All right, so there's a convenient sort of way to have a trap that does something. Right. So let's see. Well, I like that. Let's see. Let's put the player. Oh, well, I shouldn't have been in play mode. That's now nothing is going to be there where I left it. All right. So that's the idea. Feel free to use. Okay, for the smart enemies, are there alternatives to making aimable enemies like in Shmup? Also, for elevators, can we use animation to make it move? Absolutely. Animation to make things move is absolutely fine. Use your imagination. Use what's in your tool set. You can use animation. You can use scripting. You could use, if you want to use Bolt, give that a try. That counts as scripting. If you want to use effectors, that's fine. You can use joints. You can do things like, if you have a joint, which is a trap door here, and you have a joint, which is a hinge, you can have a motor on it, right? So there's lots and lots of different ways to approach the problem. So use your imagination, use what's in, kind of show off some of these different things. Basically, if we've covered it in class, you're free to use it. So regarding smart enemies, alternatives to making aimable, it doesn't really necessarily have to be aimable. Again, in the case of the enemy, it's really just supposed to be kind of like the enemy senses So usually it's the sight seeing the player. You know, it could also be like something, you know, it doesn't have to be seeable. It could be like, oh, can the enemy hear the player? Yeah. Yep, that's fine. You know, it should be, I guess I'm looking for enemies shouldn't just be triggered, right? An enemy that just changes behavior based on a trigger is more like a trap. Whereas an enemy that is making a decision based on a behavior or let's go over here. We're going to create a new, there's a lot of stuff in that buyout games. So in here on our normal assets, we're just going to create a 2.5 is already reasonably substantial. And we'll name this something called platform friction. And then for our elevator, we will make sure to put that on there. So now when the player runs, oops. Affect how fast the player moves if you've added more friction on there. So that grounding suddenly. Oh, I know why. I know why. What's happening is I think the tile map collider that is on the elevator probably should be. I should add a composite collider 2D on there. And we'll just make that kinematic. Kind of just we're still, there we go. He doesn't have much time. If I made the friction too high on there. Been kind of stuck there, the poor player. Let's add a little bit of a radius there. 0.1. Let's see, point. Too much here. 0.02. Let's move a little bit easier. Okay, I've got a lot of tuning in my game to go here. Any other questions? All right. I'm just getting a couple of questions that I need to follow up. Actually, I'm going to stop the streams and keep on the voice. We'll do that, or at least keep on the. I'll be here. I'm just going to stop streaming because I've got a few things I've got to like do on my desktop here. Sorry, I get some inquiries from the department.